Hello internet, and today's video is going to be day 3 of top 7 in 7 days. This was started by Book Roast, and her channel will be linked down below, and today's topic is going to be audiobooks. And of course I'm going to only choose audiobooks that I have listened to in 2017 just to keep it a little shorter and so that it's more recent in my memory. So let's get started. First book we're going to go with is A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. This was so good. I just loved this story. This is about an old man called Ove. His name is Ove because the audiobook says his name is Ove. So it's Ove, okay? It's Ove. Anyway, it's about an old man called Ove, and he's just kind of a grumpy old man. He lives in this cul-de-sac, and he's just a very ordinary old man, and he's like always yelling at people not to drive around in the cul-de-sac because it's against the rules, and new people move in next door, and he's just kind of frustrated with them because what kind of man doesn't know how to back in his own trailer? So this is just the story of Ove and his life as an old man, and then we get back flashes occasionally of him as a young boy, him with his wife, all sorts of different things. I think what makes this book so wonderful, and especially this audiobook so great, is the tone of voice in which Ove says everything. Like, you can hear his disgruntlement, you can hear how tired he is with everyone around him. It makes his emotions so real when you hear the audiobook that I don't think you would get the same grasp of if you were reading it yourself. Because sometimes when you're reading it yourself, you just don't read in those emotions where they should be. But having it read to you, having this old man tell you his story, hearing the way that he is, getting those vocal signals for how he is emotionally outside of just he was angry being stated in the book, really made this the best. So I want to read more of Fredrik Backman, but I'm probably going to read them on audiobook because I really love that added benefit of just hearing the different tones and all the different characters' voices. Something that you don't get when you just read it by eye. Book number 2 is going to be Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Elier Señez. And this is about a Mexican-American boy and just him trying to figure out life. He just has a lot of things that mess him up in the head where it really frustrates him, and he's trying to work through all those things. He's trying to grow into a man. It's a coming of age story, right? It's him just trying to figure out what life is like. This book was narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he just did such a fantastic job narrating the voice. I loved the tone of voice he gave to Aristotle, the disgruntlement that he could have, the indifference that he could have, and the character and life that he brought to the different characters that he voiced. I liked hearing his voice with the Spanish in it, where it just gave you that atmosphere because it brought you into the idea. Yes, this is a Mexican-American family. Yes, these are the things that they do. These are the things that they worry about, but they are just people, right? So it was like, it just brought you into the atmosphere of the kind of culture that is added into this kid, that this added benefit of reminding you that this is just as much as a diverse telling of a boy coming to terms with who he is in basis of who he is as a person, but who he is in basis of his culture and his self-identity. So I hope that makes sense. I sometimes wonder about what I say and what comes out of my mouth, but I liked the audiobook. It made the story for me. It really did. It just made the story for me. It made the treatment of the characters so much more. Book number 4 on audiobook, I'm going to go with Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So I like this audiobook simply because it saved me and it ended up giving me a chance to love this story. I think in the case of this book, I would have never got to see all the parts I loved about this story and all the parts I love about Pierce Brown's creative imagination when it comes to a revolt story and it comes to a dystopic story, if it wasn't for the audiobook, because there was just so many points in which I wasn't enjoying myself, in which I just couldn't handle what was going on because I didn't like the characters, I didn't like the situation, or I just got frustrated with it. But the audiobook pulled me through that with the atmospheric voicing and just the fact that it was an audiobook and I couldn't just trust myself to skim over everything that I didn't like. So I really liked this audiobook, mainly because I was thankful that it gave me a chance, not only by being a good audiobook and having a good narrator that made me invested in trying to figure it out, but also by whispering the words in my ears so my eyes couldn't just skim over the parts that I wasn't having as much fun with. Audiobook number 4 is going to go to Rainbow Rowell, and that is Carry On. I found this audiobook by chance. I've already read this book. This was a reread for me when it came to audio. And I love the audiobook because when I was rereading it as an audiobook, I realized that there was a lot of emotions that I just hadn't read into the voices, like a lot of snarkiness that was more of a level that I had read originally, exasperation, like all the sort of emotions and those tones that I may not have picked up as a reader originally, or not to the vast extent that the narrator did. But when it was read by the narrator, I was like, oh yeah, I can see, like, it just sounded so different than when I had read it originally. And it just added more to the book for me, where I really could appreciate it, because I was like, you're adding in a story that I've already read before. I already know where it's going, but it seems like a new story because these emotions aren't the same ones I read when I was reading the book originally. So it gave me a new perspective on the book. So I really, really loved the audiobook. Plus, it never hurts to have a British guy whispering in your ear. Two different accents. Well, several different accents, which I really enjoy. I like when you have more than just an American talking in your ear. I hear enough Americans every day. I like seeing diversity even in voices. So that's a funny thing to say, but it was a really great time. Number 5, we're going to go with Harry Potter, specifically Jim Dale. And I'm going to give it just to Jim Dale in general. Like, most loved is his Harry Potter voicing, but when I reread Harry Potter, most of the time it's on audiobook. Like, in year 11 through 12 of my life, no, more like 11 through 13, all I did all day long was listening to Harry Potter and listening to Jim Dale caress my ears with the wonderful world that J.K. Rowling created. And I love it. Like, when I think of Harry Potter, when I think of the voices, I don't think of the movies. I think of what Jim Dale did when he narrated. Like, I can't think of a better narrator. And I've tried to listen to other narrators and other people read Harry Potter to me, and it feels like blasphemy because I grew up with Jim Dale. Jim Dale raised me just as much as J.K. did with the Harry Potter series, because he was there. He was there reading to me all the time. I was just so in love. And he was one of the main reasons why I fell in love with audiobooks to begin with, was just hearing his voice tell me this story. And I got into the idea of having people that I've never met before and never seen in my life tell me stories as well. So it was just a great way for me to be introduced to audiobooks to begin with, and just fall in love with the concept of having someone read me a story that wasn't my grandmother. So, book number 6, I'm going to go with Laini Taylor's Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. I read this over the summer, and I really, really loved the words that Laini Taylor wrote down. I really, really loved her way of writing and her style of writing. So by that, I also loved the narrator. I thought she brought life the words of Laini Taylor. Now, I do have a lot of problems with the story, but outside of the story and where it concludes sometimes, and some of the things that Laini Taylor does to push forward the plot that I find irritating, I did in fact love the audiobook. The audiobook, once again, like the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, this audiobook was what made me fall in love with this story, because I'm not quite sure I would have loved this story if I hadn't listened to it on audiobook. Because like I said, I get frustrated easily, and a lot of times I push through my frustrations. A lot of times when I'm reading, I really am just curious about where the story is going, that I don't let my anger and my frustration cloud me in seeing the goods of the story. But it definitely helps when you have a book where you just can't skip over everything, right? It's not as easy to skip pages and skim pages in an audiobook as it is if you have a physical copy. So by having this audiobook and having it be read so well, and having the words being read done so well, it really pushed me forward into finishing the book, even though there was a lot of parts where I just got really frustrated with the choices being made plot wise. So I really love this audiobook, because again, I would have never finished this series and never read this series and never had the chance to fully experience a Lady Taylor trilogy and figuring out what kind of reader I am and what kind of things I like, and just being analytical, if the audio wasn't there to force me all the way through it. Because I'm not above DNFing, even though I find it just kind of disappointing, and I am a really curious person. So audiobooks help me to lessen my DNF count and to learn more about the things I like and don't like in stories, which I always want to know. And the last book on this list is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And oh my gosh, this was so good for me. This was such a great book. I loved this book because I just love mythology, okay? I love mythology with all my heart. It's one of my favorite things to learn about. So I was really, 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 really pleased with this book. So this follows a guy named Shadow, and he ends up wrapped up in this battle of the old gods versus the new gods. And I just liked the narrator's voice. I liked the epic story of it, and I'm not quite sure if I could get through the whole book if I had to read it by myself, because this is a pretty hefty book. I don't think this is a short book. It was 18 hours, and just a lot of the things in this book I feel came across better for me as an audiobook and having it told to me, because it just felt more like a story being told. I don't know how to explain it. It's like sitting in a circle and having a storyteller tell you a story. I feel like this is the type of story in which you need someone like that. You need someone to tell you a story instead of reading the story for yourself. It felt better to me, right? It felt more natural to me to have someone tell me this amazing epic than for me to read it for myself. So I really appreciated listening to the audiobook. Plus, it was done really well, so I wasn't hurt, but I just thinking more about this book, for me personally, it came across as a story that I just needed someone to tell me versus reading for myself. So listening to the audiobook just made it all the better for me. And those are all 7 books that I think are great as audiobooks, that I really appreciated as audiobooks in 2017. Do you like audiobooks? That's my question. Do you guys like audiobooks? I have talked to several people about audiobooks, praising audiobooks, and I've heard several people say they can't listen to audiobooks, they're frustrating. I have people who only listen to audiobooks because they can't sit down and read a book. So where do you stand on the audiobook spectrum of how many audiobooks you like to read, or whether or not they're not the thing for you? If you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those buttons down below, and don't forget to go look at Book Roast and what her choices are for this topic. And goodbye, internet.